Hey there, you're welcome to this week's Tech Tuesdays webinar on what's new in Informatica Axon Data Governance v7.2.0. I'm Brinda, your host for today's webinar, and we have both Amrish Thakkar, Director, and Ian Stahl, Senior Director from the Product Management team as the presenters for this session. Before we start this webinar, here are some housekeeping tips. This webinar is for 1 hour, including the 50 minutes Q&A. You can post your queries in the Q&A box. Dial-in participants are muted for this webinar. The session is being recorded and will be available in the Informatica Support YouTube channel and the Success portal. The recording will be emailed to you as well. You can also put in your feedbacks and suggestions for the session in the post-webinar survey. The Tech Tuesdays webinar program is hosted within the Success portal. The Informatica Success Portal is a microlearning platform offering free and unlimited learning to all registered users. This feature-rich platform was launched to help you learn and use Informatica products better. A newly launched data governance learning path in the Success Portal will enable you to implement data-centric approach to compliance based on your role. Here are a few important links that you can go over later that will help you in your product adoption journey with Informatica. Over to you, Amrish and Ian. Thank you.
Thank you, Brinda. And thank you all for joining today. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. And I hope you're all staying safe. What we will be covering today is what's new in Axon 7.2. So we'll start with data governance side of things, and then Ian will follow up with providing details on what's new in the data marketplace front. And then we will take up questions towards the end of this. Now, along the session, please feel free to continue to write your question and post your questions, and we will keep responding as you post it up. And towards the end, we will have some opportunity for live Q&A. So here's a quick highlight of what's coming in 7.2. So segmentation was a feature that was introduced in version 7.0, and we are following up with the ability to allow you to link objects across segments. We will have some bulk upload improvements and unison search user experience improvements. There's also improvements around custom fields and dashboards. There are improvements that we have in terms of the auto onboarding from Axon Edc Integration perspective, as well as support for additional resources, aka Workday. There's also improvements to the Axon Data Quality Integration, which I will talk about. Now, we have introduced usage statistics for you to help understand what kind of usage patterns you're seeing and how the trends look like for object creation and so on. So I will give you some details on those improvements on the stakeholder assignment as well as the profile page creation. Starting 7.2, we are also adding support for Kubernetes deployment. So along with Docker that was supported in 7.1, you can now also use Kubernetes. And then on the Mac OS front, we have added support for the Quick Look installer for Mac OS. So if you are a Mac user, and if you want to use Quick Look application that was introduced in 2019, you can now do so on the Mac OS. And then in terms of the PAM, again, updates on which OSs are supported in addition to what we already did. With that said, let's get into some of the details. So segmentation is a feature that was introduced in version 7.0. Now, 7.0 basically gave you an ability to define your segments, and this allows you to actually define kind of an area or a fenced area, which only people who has been granted explicit permission can access, right? So if you have content, if you have your data sets and systems that should be available or limited to a certain set of individuals within the organization, you can use segmentation as a capability to extend that and limit that access to a specific set of folks. What you could not do in 7.0 or 7.1 was link your objects that exist across segments. So if you have an object in one segment, and if you want to link it to object in another segment, you could not do so. And with 7.2, we are introducing this capability to allow you to have links or relationship that goes across segments. For example, if you had a glossary, or if you want to define your own enterprise glossary, which everybody should have access to, but if you have certain systems, data sets, attributes, that needs to be limited to a certain set of individuals. And so as a result, you define those as part of a specific segment. Now you can link your data sets and attributes that belong to a private segment to a business terms or metrics that are part of a more global definition or as part of the enterprise segment, right? So that's what this cross-segment linking allows you to do. Now, again, this basically goes across the board, but there are some restrictions which I will talk about. First, you can have only relationships between enterprise and the private segment, right? So if you have a business term or glossaries defined in the enterprise segment, but if your policies are in the private segment, you can associate or link those, right? Or they can be within the same segment. What is not allowed is for you to link two objects which belong to private segments. For example, if policy belongs to one private segment and glossary belongs to another private segment, you cannot have a relationship across those. At least one of these items has to be in the enterprise segment. Now, doesn't matter which type of object is in the enterprise segment. As far as one object is in the enterprise segment, you can have that relationship. Now, this also applies to hierarchies, right? So the hierarchies has to be in a single segment. For example, if you have a glossary hierarchy or if you have a policy hierarchy, the complete hierarchy has to be in a single segment. So it can be either a private segment, it can be either an enterprise segment, but you cannot have a hierarchy that starts in an enterprise segment, say, and then at some point crosses over into the private segment, right? So those kind of crossovers for a hierarchy are not allowed. Now, there is one exception to it, and that's the system dataset attribute hierarchy. Now, while system datasets and attributes kind of are different kinds of objects, they still form a hierarchy where dataset always has to belong to a system and attribute belongs to a dataset. And in this case, you could have systems, for example, in the enterprise segment, and then you have datasets and attributes part of the private segment, right? So that if the broader system wants to be enterprise, but certain datasets you want to put it in the private segment, this allows you to achieve that kind of an objective, right? Now, one thing you cannot do is system being in the private segment and dataset in the public segment, right? So you cannot have that, but system being in the enterprise segment and datasets or certain parts of the dataset moving into the private segment will be allowed as part of 7.2. Now, one exception to this private to private relationship is the system interface. Now, in 7.0, when we introduced segmentation, we allowed you to have attributes that can be in private segment, and then you can have those attribute relationships that goes between two private segments. And the same thing applies to the system interface as well. So when you define a system interface, you can have those system interfaces in two different private segments and then have a links or association between those two interfaces. And this is basically to help you understand or define your lineage that goes across private segments and still allow you to kind of see that. Now, the way it works is if you go to the lineage and if you don't have access to one attribute or one interface, what this will do is it will on the lineage side block out and kind of give you a blacked out boxes on the system to show you that there are some objects that are flowing across, but it does not allow you to see that information, right? So you can see that there is something, but you cannot really see what it is, right? If you don't have access to that specific object or specific segment, really. But yeah, so system interface is one exception. Also, additionally, what we have done in 7.2 is allow you to make changes to the segments, to the UI as well, right? So there were certain limitations with 7.0.7.1 where you could not move segments using the UI, and you had to do that only through the bulk upload. But now you can make some of those changes as well. So that's a brief on the cross-segment linking. Moving on to the Unison improvements. So we introduced the fuzzy search again in 2019, and there were some improvements that we have introduced as part of 7.2 to help you with the fuzzy search. The first one is the suggestions that are based now on the ranking, right? So when you search for something, depending on where that specific string appears, for example, if it appears in name versus description versus alias and so on, we will now basically use all of these parameters to rank objects or the suggestions in terms of what is the closest match to the furthest match. And so the suggestions that you see when you start typing in the Unison search will be based on this ranking. So the most close match will appear at the top, so that again, if, for example, if you search for a customer and customer appears in the name, that will be higher ranked than if the customer appears as part of a description, right? And if customer appears both in name and description, it will be even higher ranked, right? So the suggestions that you get will be based on what you're typing and where it appears. And so this makes it easier for you as a user to get to the object that you are looking for, because the things that are closely matching will appear at the top. The second thing is we have done improvements on the fuzzy search by including the transposing of the characters as part of the fuzziness, right? So what I mean by that is if you're typing as a user typing something, and if you swap two characters, earlier that was considered as two changes and it was not even showing up in the fuzziness. But if you, as fast a part of fast typing, if you swap two characters in customer, for example, it'll still result in giving you the search results, which is customer, right? And again, so that really helps you, and we often do that, right? As the part of quickly typing, we do end up kind of swapping two characters often. And so this will help as well in the fuzzy search. What we have also done is improved ability to give you searches, which basically does as a leading or a lagging start. And what that means is if you want to look for something that begins with or something that ends with, you will basically now be able to use stars, so that you can say, give me everything with this trans star, so everything that's starting with trans or ending with ing, for example, or whatever, right? So again, gives you an ability to search with lagging and leading strings. Also, what we have added is the ability for you to search for empty fields. So often, as part of your governance program, you may want to ensure that, hey, certain values are populated all the time. For example, if you have a requirement to say that, hey, alias should be always populated, as an example, right? And today you cannot go and look for fields or look for entries or objects where alias is empty. Or for example, if you have certain fields which like have a drop-down value but needs to be populated, but it's not mandatory, right? Now you'll be able to go and look for those kind of things. So if you provide empty quotes and use select alias name from the search option, it will give you everything where alias is empty. Similarly, in the drop-down values, you will have an option of empty to say, if the field is empty, for example, if KDE is not populated, I can basically go ahead and select that empty option, which will give me all the objects where KDE is not populated, either with a true or a false, right? So again, if for a governance or effective governance program, you will be able to run those kind of queries and use that to go and complete your tasks. Additionally, one of the long-standing asks from our customers was around ability to define a view that basically can be set for all users, right? So again, we introduced an ability a couple of versions back where you can now, as an administrator, define which facets are shown by default to all users and the order of that facet, right? So for example, as an organization, you have decided that these are the 5 or 6 facets that are important, and I want that to be available to all my users by default, you could do so. But one of the things you could not do was within a facet, if I wanted to, which columns appear by default in the Unison search or on the Unison grid, and the order of that columns, as well as the size of the columns and so on. So if you, for example, added a couple of new custom fields and you wanted to make those defaults for all your users, that was not possible until now, right? Now with 7.2, we are introducing that capability. So as a super admin, you will have an option to basically save a layout within the Unison that will be available for all users. And what basically it consists of is basically which columns appear by default, the order of the columns, and the size of the columns, right? So that layout can now be set by the administrator. And as an administrator, you will have an additional, super admin, you will have an additional option to say save default layout. And when you click on that, it will basically save the layout and make that layout available for all users, right? I'm talking about all admins and web users and so on. And now, of course, from that point on, users will be able to override that specific default view with their own views and customize it to their liking. So that's still possible. But by default now, the super admins will be able to make a default view for all users, right? So again, a long-standing ask, and this will now be addressed with 7.2. Now, moving on to the Axon Edc integration. So in 7.1, we introduced the ability to do rule-based onboarding that gives you a lot more control on what kind of assets get onboarded from EDC into Axon, right? Now, one of the things that we did not do when we did for the rule-based onboarding or automated onboarding is the ability to basically trigger your approval process, right? So as an organization, if you have decided that every data set and attribute that gets created needs to go through an approval process, now for the manually created ones, we had an option, but that did not apply to anything that was onboarded from the EDC perspective. So now we are adding that support. So either if you are manually onboarding through the managed catalog links, or if you are using the rule-based onboarding, we will now basically, if enabled, all right, from the admin perspective, we will basically go through the same mandatory approval process for data set and attribute creation, even for the manual as well as the automated onboarding, right? So this slide talks about the manual onboarding. And basically, here's an example of what you will see, that if it is enabled, you will see a note saying, an automated change request has been created and approval has been initiated for the same. Similarly, for the automated onboarding, if you have enabled it through the rule-based onboarding, again, we will be able to trigger that mandatory approval process that will go through the approval process depending on your configuration that has been enabled by the administrator. Now, another one that has been added in 7.2 is the ability to handle multiple data sets with the same name, right? So often we encounter that if you have a resource with multiple schemas and you will have multiple tables with the same name across schemas and multiple column names within those tables and so on, right? An example here is like, for example, if you have two schemas called finance and HR as an example, right? And each of them could have a table called employee, and then within that a column called ID as an example, right? So until now, until 7.1, what was happening is, as part of automated onboarding, is that if you have two tables with the same name, we will create a single data set called employee, and all the attributes from both those tables will basically be put under the same data set. But now with 7.2, we basically are segregating that, and for each table, we will be basically creating one data set and attributes appropriately under each of those data sets, depending on how the top column and structure is. So no longer with 7.2, all of the information across tables will be bundled into a single data set, even though they have the same name, right? And just to kind of give an example here, right? If you have multiple schemas and each schema has same table name, right? For each of these tables, we will basically end up creating a separate data set and a separate set of attributes within each of these data sets, depending on which schema that belongs to, right? So again, this helps you separate those information out and not combine everything into a single place. So that was Axon EDC. Moving on to the usage statistics. So again, for a lot of you would have seen something similar introduced in EDC or Enterprise Data Catalog as part of 10.4.1, which is introduced as data asset analytics, right? But basically the goal there was to give you insights into the usage and some trends around how the usage and adoption of the product has been, right? So the usage statistics that we are introducing as part of Axon 7.2 is also along the same lines. Now, we are taking a little different approach, right? So the approach we have is that we will not have this dashboards or widgets available as part of the pre-built Axon dashboards, but instead we are exposing those statistics as part of materialized views. So Axon uses Postgres repository, and we will be able to create views or materialized views on top of the Postgres and make this information available to you, so that you can use this to visualize it in your tool of choice, right? So you can, if you're a Tableau user, you will be able to visualize it in Tableau. If you're a Power BI user, you can do it there, or if you're a MicroStrategy user and so on, right? So again, depending on your BI tool, you will be able to visualize those views and create your own charts, your own ways of looking at things, right? And so that's a benefit that you get here. Now, every night there's a job that will run and basically give you a stats from the last 24 hours, right? And of course, you have the historical trends there as well. Now, all the documentation is there, right, to help you understand what those views are and what information you will get, so that you can effectively use those views and create your own dashboards as part of your own BI tool. Now, here's an example of what one of those trends could be, right? So the example here is the login stat. So I want to understand how many users are logging in day over day. So the views basically will give you on a day-by-day basis how many times each user has logged in and what the user role has been, right? So if I want to say how many admins versus how many web users have logged in, how many times a specific user has logged in, and if I want to create trend charts, I will be able to use those views to be able to visualize that in my BI tool. Now, the kind of stats that we have available as part of 7.2 is broken up into 3 buckets, right? The first one is the change request statistics. So this will give you a lot of details and views to give you information on how the change requests have been used, right? So how many change requests created, who are the top creators of the change request, right? How the reattestation process that was introduced in 7.1 kind of works out, right? What is the average duration of the CR resolution, right? All those stats will now be available through the views and you will be able to visualize that. Similarly, on the trending and growth, you will be able to see and visualize how my asset has grown over time. So if I have glossaries added day over day, week over week, month over month, similarly, you can do so for the updated assets as well as the user growth over time as well. And then the last bucket is about user creation and login. So how many users were provisioned or deprovisioned based on that configuration, how many user logins that I have seen over time, right? So you'll be able to visualize those as well, right? So these are the 3 main buckets. Of course, there are more stats that we are looking at around search, around object usage and so on, and user engagement, something that we will continue to add on in the future releases, but this is what you will get with 7.2. Now, there are a lot of other improvements that have gone in as well. So one of the things that we have done is improved the whole natural language processing based data quality rule generation. So we introduced this capability or a feature in 6.3. What we have done, 2 things basically in this version. One is we have improved the number of options that the user has, right? So earlier, if you provided a business rule and if the system was not able to parse, or if there are issues, it may not return anything, or it may just return one result, and you only have the option of accepting or rejecting, right? But for example, if you had a rule to say, I want the value between 1 and 10, right? So when you say between 1 and 10, does that include 1? Does that include 10? Does that include both? Or is it between 1 and 10, which is basically 2 through 9? Now, those kind of things, it depend on how system kind of parse it or how you type the rule, but you will only get one option. What we are changing here is we will give you now in this kind of rules, multiple options. So we will give you things like, less than 10, but greater than 1, less than equal to 10 and less than equal to or greater than equal to 1 and so on, right? So depending on what you are exactly looking at, you will be able to pick from a rule, and then system will go ahead and create rules based on that specific logic, right? So it significantly increases the chances of you getting your option and system be able to generate that rule without you having to go to data quality team to help you define those rules. And then the second thing that we have improved here significantly is the accuracy of the language, right? So the language that the user uses, now user can use a lot more variations and words and kind of verbs and so on. And we can handle it with lots more sophistication and come back with a appropriate rule even for a lot of variations there, right? So significant improvements in the handling of the business language that the user has provided. Now, this is available out of the box with 7.2, but it is also available on 7.1 as an EBF or as part of the EBF that was introduced. So again, if you're on 7.1 and don't plan to upgrade, you can still benefit from this capability. We are also adding an ability to create additional widgets or group by support in the widgets, right? So earlier, when you went to create a new widget, there is only limited options available, right? Now this options in terms of group by has been extended to all your custom fields, which are of Boolean type or drop down. Additionally, we have also added some of the out of the box fields, but basically anything that's filterable from the Unison search, now you can create a widget based on that as well, right? So again, a significant enhancement from that perspective. We are also adding custom field support for change requests. So currently the change request only has some out of the box fields. If you want to extend that with your own custom fields, you will be able to add additional fields to that as well. Now, on the change request fronts, we have added a couple of things. So the workflows that had a couple of fields, right, when you define called status in the life cycle that you can populate to say, what is the value of the status in the life cycle at the end of the workflow completion. Now, those only were applicable so far if you had mandatory approval enabled. But for the manual workflows and CRs, this was not applied. And so we are basically extending this support to even the manual change request. And so when the workflow completes, the status and the lifecycle will be appropriately updated to the status provided as part of the workflow. And then the other enhancement is for the CRs, so the change requests that are already completed or canceled, those can now no longer be edited. Earlier, even if you were completed, you could go and change it, but now those are kind of locked, and there is no option of re-initiating or revoking the same change request. You have to go through the same process all over again. And then in terms of the UI and the bulk upload consistency, so there were some inconsistencies in terms of the labels, in terms of the behaviors, right? And a lot of those have been now addressed as part of 7.2. So you will see that consistency of the labels across object pages, across Unison and bulk upload templates. In terms of the labels you see, you will have behavioral consistencies in terms of how to handle like the default stakeholder assignment or custom fault default value population and so on, right? So again, some of these inconsistencies that you may have seen between UI and bulk upload have now been addressed. We are adding support for Excel export option in Unison. So far it was only PDF and CSV. We are adding an Excel option. And I think one of the big benefits is for the non-English exports, right, where we had seen issues with CSV and others. Now Excel will help you address that better. In terms of the data quality, bulk upload and update. So one of the things that you could not do was upload your frequency, right, as part of the bulk upload of the data quality, either standard or local rules. So now you can basically upload your frequency settings through the bulk upload template as well as you can now basically do linking to the rule reference in case of a standard rule and to your profile or a scorecard in case of a local rule as part of the bulk upload or bulk update as well, right? So now pretty much everything can be done through the bulk upload from a data quality rule perspective. The other thing that we have added is ability to restrict stakeholders to a predefined users, right? So until now, what would happen is if you are a stakeholder on an object, and if I want to create or add somebody as a data steward, right? I could basically create add any user as a data steward. So it doesn't matter who the user is, whether the user is an existing stakeholder or not. I can basically make anybody a data steward. And so now we are giving you a control in 7.2 to pre-assign the set of users to a specific role, right? So what happens is if you, as an administrator, you will be able to go to the admin panel and say, I want this 5 users or this 10 users to play the role of data steward. And so when anybody is assigning the role of data steward to an object, they will be able to pick only from that list of the pre-selected users, right? You cannot pick any user anymore. So that will basically allow you to control in terms of who can play what role. Now, this applies only if the users have been assigned to a specific role, right? If you are not in the admin panel, then the behavior that you had in 7.1 or prior will continue, right? And this applies to the stakeholders assigned either through the UI or through the bulk upload as well, right? So this again gives you a lot more control on who can play what role if you want to, and restrict the set of users who can play a specific role. We have also added some restrictions on the field that can be changed on the user profile page. So and today, with 7.1, you could go and make a lot of changes on the fields. Now, the problem was a lot of these fields were coming from your LDAP or your Active Directory, right? And updating those fields on the UI was only changing it the next day by when the next LDAP sync happens. So what we are doing is basically we are restricting the kind of fields that you can change within the UI and you bring it from LDAP. Now, for now, this is basically pre-configured. If you want to make some changes, they are available through through the YAML file configuration, and we can provide more details if needed. But the idea is any fields that are synced from LDAP, you basically cannot make those changes through the UI, right? So we are making that restriction. We are also adding support for the value list API. So value list could only be created and updated through UI. Now you will be able to do so through APIs as well. So if you are using value lists and if you want to use APIs to keep and update and delete those values on an ongoing basis, you will be able to do so. Here are the kind of the contracts that you have, the APIs that we will have in terms of the value list API. I will not go through each of those in detail. And then there's also a change made in the policy to system relationship where earlier when I would search for policy and policies linked to a data set, it was not giving me the system as part of the unison search. So we have extended that to give you system as a search result as well, if depending on which data and attribute that system belongs to. And then that brings us to the PAM update. So we are adding support for Red Hat Edx as well as SUSE 15 as part of 7.2. So you will now be able to deploy on either of those operating systems. In terms of the third-party library upgrade, so we are upgrading the jQuery and Bootstrap to the latest, as well as the Apache Tomcat as well as web server are being upgraded as well. Talked about the quick look support for Mac OS, so that's there. Now, in terms of the email integration, so we are adding support for SendGrid. So if you are a SendGrid user, you will be able to configure that and use that to generate your email notifications. In terms of the EDC resources that are now supported, you have support for Workday. And in terms of MicroStrategy, we are adding a couple of additional class types, so you'll be able to do more with MicroStrategy. And in terms of the data quality automation, we are adding S3 support, and S3 support is limited to the delimited files for now. And we are looking at adding other file types in the future versions. In terms of the product compatibility, again, 7.2 will work with 10.5 data quality, 10.5 enterprise data catalog as data privacy management. And in terms of dropped version, we are dropping support for enterprise data catalog version 10.2 and data privacy management version 5.1. Now, I do want to highlight, right, 10.5 platform will only work with Axon 7.x, right? So if you are upgrading to EDC 10.5, for example, and if you are on Axon 6.3, it will not work. You will have to upgrade Axon to 7.0 or above version, right? So you can go 7.0, 7.1, 7.2, either of those, but any 6x or prior version will not work with 10.5 EDC or DQ and so on. And then the direct version upgrade to 7.2 will be available from 6.2 onwards. So if you're on 6.2 or higher, you will be able to upgrade directly to 7.2. If you are in the prior version, it will be a two-step upgrade for you. And then in terms of the hardware spec, again, for 7.2, 8 cores required as a minimum configuration, 24 gig of RAM and disk space of 200 gig. And for specific sizing, if you have any specific requirement, please reach out to us and we can help you out there. With that said, I would hand over to Ian to cover data marketplace enhancements coming in 7.2. Over to you, Ian. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Ian Stahl, Senior Director of Product Management for Data Governance Solutions at Informatica. For this week's Tech Tuesday, I thought I would give you an overview of the upcoming capabilities that we're introducing in Axon Data Marketplace and its upcoming version 7.2 release. As many of you know, Axon Data Marketplace is a feature of our Axon Data Governance solution. We released it a little more than a year ago. It's designed to leverage the business context provided by data governance and data catalog to help data analysts and other consumers distributed throughout the enterprise find the data they need through a simple one-stop shop merchandising front end. It leverages that data governance business context through a simple model utilizing data stewards and subject matter experts to help to collaborate to identify which data is optimized for self-service use, then enrich that data, qualify that data, assign ownership to that data so that everyone knows exactly how and where that data can and should be used. Once the data is qualified and enriched in that way, it can be published to the marketplace portal for self-service use. For the data analyst, they have a simple browse and shop experience that allows them to easily find the data they need. Once they have access to it, they can evaluate that data on the basis of the business context the data governance team has provided, ensuring that it has data content that they need, that it meets the quality conditions that they need, that the policies that are in place to be able to ensure compliant use of that data are available to them so they can ensure compliance with those policies, and that the data is accessible and deliverable to them at a delivery endpoint and in a format that's suitable for their needs. Once they find the data they need, they simply buy it. Behind the scenes, we just kick off data governance workflows, notifying the data owners and data engineers of the need to be able to request and access that data, integrating with underlying IT service processes like ServiceNow to ensure that back-end processes that result in the timely fulfillment of that data are available, are integrated into that workflow. As a result, organizations that take advantage of data governance to ensure data democratization outcomes can enable distributed data analysts to be able to find data that's relevant for their analytics or other purposes. And when that data is sourced and used, it can be used in a manner that ensures compliance with the organization's privacy and data sensitivity policies. Data that does have high value to the organization and wide utility can be used more broadly throughout the organization, ensuring consistency of data analytics and other outcomes across the enterprise where that data is used. At the same time, reducing the cost of operations by lowering the data stewardship and data engineering costs necessary for each data access request. All this adds up to an ability for organizations to meet the growing demand for data within their organizations so that the data can be used in a relevant and timely manner to ensure effective and accurate decision outcomes, just as like our friends at McKinsey advise. Axon Data Marketplace 7.2 is the fourth release of Axon of Data Marketplace with the Axon Data Governance solution. It's coming out at the end of this month. Axon Data Marketplace focuses on a few key priorities in terms of the additional enhancements and capabilities we're introducing as part of the solution. Operationalization has been a key theme for Data Marketplace since its inception, enabling that self-service access and use capability to be adaptable to the operating model existing in the organization's data analytics and data management teams. In Axon 7.2, we're enhancing both the order management and publication capability to streamline the delivery of data to the marketplace and the subsequent review and approval of the orders for that data when the data consumer requests it. We're also making some enhancements to the marketplace's end user experience, allowing for better browse experience and a more editorially focused management of the front end of marketplace to help consumers find relevant data in a timely manner. Let me walk you through some of those features. The central artifact, the central feature of data marketplace is its data collection. You can think of it as a kind of a packaging of the data assets in the organization. The intent of this packaging is it allows data to be composed in a manner that is suitable for endpoint end user consumption and delivers all the relevant business context coming from the data governance program to help them make an effective decision. Marketplace version 7.2 enhances the data collection so that data collections can be front-loaded into the marketplace to be able to make data sets that have wide utility or wide traction available to different distributed consumers. These data collections can then be linked to Axon data sets upstream, and in fact can be linked to multiple Axon data sets. So for example, you can connect multiple data sets to the data collection that represents a package corresponding to, say, an analytics cube. When you connect those data sets together, simply by searching Axon's backend, we automatically update the data quality reporting, the policy linkages, based on the dataset content. And since you're creating these data collections from multiple data sets, we also have introduced additional enhancements to the data usage documentation and the policy guidance that's provided by Data Marketplace when the consumer requests the data. For example, we've introduced an ability to attach content directly to the data collection. So for example, if you need information pertaining to data documentation or additional terms of use, data dictionary content, things like sample data, you can add that directly to the data collection, make it available to the consumer so they can make a more effective judgment about its use. We also allow the policies that inform the data collection, which originate from the linked datasets and are curated inside of Axon Data Governance, to be linked directly to the data collection as well. You can simply search for the relevant data collections and attach them either as part of the policy or the usage guidance directly in the data collection. And this augments the capabilities that were provided that we get automatically from Axon Data Governance. On the order processing side, another area that we've enhanced is the ability to provide alternatives to the workflow processing that's provided out of the box by the Axon Order Management System. As you know, the Order Management System has been enhanced serially over the course of the last few releases, most recently to provide online and offline notifications to the data owner and data engineer associated with the data collection when the user's request for the data comes in. In this case, we've enhanced that even further to allow offline notifications for users who need to be in the review path for the data collection, but maybe weren't named as original data owners in the collection itself. This can provide for an open comment period on the request for the data, or can provide a voting mechanism to allow those users to verify that the requested term of use is consistent with the organization's policy guidance or the intended use for the data collection. And then that can be acted on by the data owner to allow the data owner to process that request for that data and fulfill that request for that data with confidence. Finally, on the browse and search side, on the merchandising side, we've enhanced the browse experience by providing a landing page for each of the categories in the browse view. This allows for us to promote content, for example, content within the category hierarchy that's maybe getting a lot of orders. We've also provided information and assigned ownership of the categories. So organizations that want to promote data, say, in particular domains like customer data, manufacturing data, operations or financial data, can delegate the management of the content of that data, of that category, to respective individuals who are identified as having subject matter expertise in that area. Now I want to give you a quick demonstration of some of these marketplace features. Here I'm logged in as Hans, a data consumer that may be looking for some data that's relevant for his analytics project. As you can see, I can see the marketplace categories arranged here in a tile view. Also, I can see in the promotional view data that may be relevant to Hans's needs that have wide order traffic within the marketplace itself. I can click into one of these and get an open view as to this data collection. As you can see here, this data collection has multiple data sets attached to it, and I can see the individual attribute content associated with those data sets. The data quality report that's aggregated up from Hans in the data collection view rolls up the data quality measurement that we're doing across all of the data sets that participate in the data collection. In addition to that, the policies that actually control control compliant use of this data are also an aggregation of the policies that come from the data collection. As with other data collections, Hans can see all the different ways in which he might be able to get this data asset. And if it looks like something that he needs, he can just go ahead and check it out. He supplies the details for how he wants to use it, accepts the terms and conditions, click Submit. He can track the order on his personal homepage so he can stay appraised of how that data asset is being used and keep appraised of notifications of the request for data that's coming in for the orders that he already has in place. John, the data owner, gets notification of that data of Hans's request as well, and can come in here and add commentary pertaining to this request. As you can see here in the commentary, he can flag other users like Kate to be able to get her assent to be able to approve the data request. When he submits this, Kate gets a request for the input so that she can provide timely review and acceptance of the request for the data. Over here on Kate's view of Marketplace, you can see that she's received a notification of John's request to provide input on the order that Hans logged earlier. She can go directly here, get access to that order directly from the Marketplace Notification tab. You can see that she's got this request for notification and a option to vote or comment on the request. Since this was set to agree or disagree, she can indicate her agreement to be able to use this data, and then indicate her additional commentary about how or why she agrees to the release of this data for Hans. John is notified of Kate's agreement and can go ahead and process the order just like he would any other. John, being the data owner, can go ahead and approve. Hans's request, and since he's also playing the role of the person responsible for the fulfillment, can determine the delivery target where access will be made for Hans's endpoint use. Axon Marketplace tracks all the order activity necessary to orchestrate the response, and maintains the state so that everybody's on the same page, and all this information, all this interaction is logged for audit control for subsequent use. John can see all of the tasks and activity related to all the orders that he's processed here on his homepage, as well as he can see the order activity in the data collection details page for which he has ownership right here, all the access grants that have been previously made available. I hope you enjoyed this short demonstration of Axon Data Marketplace capabilities in the upcoming version 7.2 release. Looking forward to speaking with you all in the future about other exciting releases that we have coming in 2021. Thank you so much for your time today.
Hey everyone, if you have any queries, please post your questions in the Q&A box. We'll try and answer them.
Perfect. So while you post your questions, a couple of questions I do want to take and bring up for the broader audience. So the first one is, when is Axon 7.2 coming out? So again, it is coming out end of this week, so 30th of April. And you should be seeing that for download soon. The second question that a few of you basically queried about was around the user statistics, especially for the non-logged in users, right? So trying to, what we are introducing in 7.2 is an ability to give you some insights into how many users have logged in and kind of help you see trends over time. But one of the things that was queried about and we don't do in 7.2 and something that we are looking at into the future release is around the ability to tell you how many non-logged in users and the kind of activity those non-logged in users have driven. So that is, again, not part of 7.2, something that we are looking into the future release, but I wanted to take that up for the broader audience. Ian, if you have any questions that you want to address while I go through the questions again.
Yeah, sure. So I got a question from Elizabeth at Indicate asking about if there was any limitations on the marketplace capability in Axon Data Governance if you were only working with Axon and Enterprise Data Catalog. And I think I maybe didn't understand the question originally when you asked it in the chat, Elizabeth, so apologies about that. I would say that in answer to that question, Axon Marketplace is a feature of Axon, so by definition, you have to have Axon has to be in there. We acquire all of our data set content that are published into Marketplace in the form of data collections from Axon. So we refer back to Axon data sets, right, for the purposes of publication. If those data sets are enriched, right, with ownership, policy, glossary tags, data quality measurements, right, we can surface that in Marketplace as an aid to the consumer, right? Upstream from that, right, if you're using Axon's integration, for example, with EDC to be able to onboard that data, that makes automation, as Amrish described earlier, as well as curation, much more straightforward because you could use Enterprise Data Catalog's technical metadata to facilitate that. Additionally, if you're integrated with data quality, you can use data quality to automate some of the profile execution to be able to provide that data quality report. So I'd say it's not necessary to use Marketplace with EDC and data quality. It does require Axon. But when you do, it obviously makes it much easier for you to scale the estate of self-service data to the size of the community of data consumers that you're trying to support. So that's how I'd answer that. Amrish?
Great, thank you. Nope, so again, I'm just going through the questions. So there are some questions around usage stats, availability. So again, that is one area that we want to continue to invest in and give you additional stats, especially stats around usage patterns, right? So how many, which are the more popular objects, right? Which objects are clicked on more number of times? How many non-logged in users have basically come in and driven those activities? How many searches performed? What are some of the keywords? So there are things that we are looking at that to basically help you with understanding your usage and users and help you drive the program to adoption. So again, you will see continued investment or continued enhancements to the user statistics coming your way. I'm just going through the questions here. So, and there are a number of questions on the marketplace. Not sure if you want to take it live or if you want to answer them.
Well, there's a couple of questions actually pertaining to the order processing workflow in Marketplace, and I think I might take that up and talk a little bit about kind of what our future plans for that. I mentioned in the overview that we've been upgrading and enhancing the order processing system in the Axon Marketplace with every release that we've done since we initially launched back in December of 2019. So for example, you might be aware that in version 7, we added a capability to bind the Marketplace order system to the Axon change request processor. And in doing so, the change request processor can generate a ServiceNow task, ServiceNow ticket in the ServiceNow system that it happens to be binded to. So we're leveraging that integration between change request processing and ServiceNow to support ServiceNow capabilities. And that capability is available today, and it'll continue to be available in version 7.2. I noted that we added some enhancements to the order processing capability in version 7.2, specifically around exception processing. So, for example, when a consumer requests access to data, all of the data owners that are named for the data collection are notified through the notification service of the need to be able to request that data. However, nobody that's not on the ownership side of that data collection gets any notification. If someone else needs to be notified, this is typically where this comes up is if some sort of exception needs to be made for the consumer's requested use of the data. We added this capability in version 7.2 to provide kind of on-the-spot notification to that out-of-band user to be able to get that exception-based response back to them in line. And then, of course, when the user does respond, just like I illustrated in the demonstration, that's added to the order flow, and the order flow provides that to for auditability purposes, things like that. So when we don't have kind of formalized exception processing and things like that, we do allow for the people who respond to the owner, the data owners and technical owners, to be able to reach out to other people as needed to be able to get the input needed for data, for it to be able to process the order effectively and in a timely manner.
So. One of the, again, commonly asked question is about supporting Jira, right? So we added support for ServiceNow integration with governance and marketplace in 7.0. Now, Jira is something that we don't yet support, and something that is on our roadmap to give you an ability to integrate with Jira like ServiceNow. But again, not until now. Axon 7.2 compatibility. So that's again a general question. So 7.2 is compatible with 10.5, 10.4, 10.4x, generally so all versions of 10.4, and even some versions of pre-10.4 as well. The PAM is available through the Axon community on the network portal. So if you're not familiar with it, you can go to network.informatica.com, sign up, and there is an Axon community where you can see all the details about the release, the EBFs announced, PAM updates, documentation, all the information is there. Plus, you can basically ask questions and respond as well. So it's a community with a wealth of information in there. If you have not explored worth looking at it. There have been some questions on the performance improvements. So yes, we continue to increase performance of the product in terms of the page loading times, in terms of query execution times. We have added a number of those enhancements in 7.0, 7.1, 7.7.2. In 7.1, we also added an ability to deploy OrientDB, the graph database that we use, to be deployed as a cluster, which can give you more scalability and faster results, especially for the unison search queries. So that continues to be one area where we improve things over every release bit by bit. So generally, there's a question on where are the next versions out. So just to give you a quick insight, so post 7.2, we are changing the model a little bit. We are looking at minor versions on 7.2. So we will have a roughly quarterly minor versions, so 7.2.1, 7.2.2, and so on. And then we are looking at 7.3 sometime in Q1 next year. So post 7.2, there will be minor versions, which will have both minor enhancements as well as, of course, improvements and bug fixes and so on. And then the next major version will be 7.3, which is currently targeted for Q1 next year. Again, this is all the safe harbor, but that's a quick roadmap for the rest of the year in terms of the release schedules. A quick look. So there are a few questions on the Quick Look. So currently, Quick Look only supports glossary view. So there are a couple of things, right? So one question was around generally an SSO support and have a seamless login between the Quick Look application and Axon. Again, that is something that we are looking at. In terms of being able to extend Quick Look to beyond glossary facet, would love to get more thoughts and hear more thoughts on it, but I have not seen many pressing use cases for it yet, but definitely open to seeing what we can do there. Okay, I'm just going through the questions. Have you considered the possibility of creating customized relationship between facet? So the relationship types can be customized for the facets where the relationship is possible, but being able to define a new type of relationship between two assets, something again we have not explored. It can get pretty crazy pretty quickly, and so again, that is one we would love to get your insight into what you're looking at and see if we can add it to the product roadmap and deliver it. Definitely appreciate, and you can always reach out to me with any thoughts that you need or any enhancements you need. Any other questions, Ian, from your side?
Yeah, I was just trying to tap out an answer to Rich. Rich had asked about provisioning in Marketplace and if it's only documentation or if does it provide security on approval. And I guess I might round out the question I was mentioning earlier about order processing in response to Rich's question. I know we're at time. So I mentioned the delivery information that's in the Marketplace data collection. And to your point, Rich, that is documentation. It documents typically the physical locations where the data can be accessible by the consumer once the user's order's approved. We document that typically because in most cases, the customer's already provisioned the data to a location where it's accessible to the consumer, and that the kind of IT response to the order process is to change the access control to that repository where the data can be accessed based on the user's order. While we don't have any plans right now to be able to automate that process, we are looking at, in a future release, exposing APIs and other interfaces to the order processor that will allow an external system, say like SailPoint or Active Directory, to automatically execute the processes to be able to change the access control list on the asset that needs to be accessible. So that is something that we're looking at in the future, and that should allow for, some additional automation around the kind of data engineering processes needed to be able to support delivery of data to consumers. Hope that helps.
Yep. Okay. There are some questions around customization. So as you would have seen in 7.2, we are adding some ability for you to set your own preferences as an administrator for all users. We are looking at additional levels of customization to say, if you can hide certain fields or if you can hide unused fields and so on. So there are some improvements that we are considering in terms of customizing and user preferences and so on. It's an ongoing journey. We continue to invest in it. I know we are about 3 minutes over, so Brinda, let me know when we have to stop.
Thank you, Amrish. Looks like we have answered most of the questions. Still, we have a few questions to be answered. Definitely, we'll get back to everyone after this session. Since we have crossed the time limit of this webinar, unfortunately we will have to end this webinar now. Thank you for your time, Amrish and Ian. Thanks everyone for joining. See you on our next Tech Tuesdays. Bye.
Thank you all.
Thank you all very much.